Hello, hello everyone. How we doing? We're winding down for the evening. Everyone getting extra excited for the drinking tonight? Some arcade? Terminator players, anybody? Yeah, got one out there. All right, our next speaker here, Kate Goldman from Cybermaniacs, and a great talk about AI. Please give a very warm welcome for Kate, folks. She's been with us a while.
Yeah, it's yours. Super. Hey, everybody. Okay. Does anyone need to stand up and get the blood moving, jumping jacks with me and one other, and then that's it? This is the last. We're heading into the final stretch, and it's all very exciting. I can hear the roar of the audience. It's amazing. This is so great. Okay, so I'm Kate. I'm the CEO and founder of Cybermaniacs, and for those of you who don't know us, we do a lot of crazy stuff, mostly focused on the human side of cybersecurity, so that basically means I have permission to do almost anything to get your employees' attention and to get them to care about cybersecurity. So we do what you would consider to be awareness training, even though it doesn't look like awareness training. And then we also are really focused on the psychology and the culture of the organization and how you can actually go in to really understand who your people are and then to work with the culture that you have so that you're not trying to force feed, slide decks of death down employees' throats, and then you expect them to care, and you wonder why that recipe is not working. So we're kind of flipping the script and doing it differently. And when John asked me if I would come talk here, I said, this is exactly perfect. This is great, because I want to talk to your audience about this, because where we cross kind of some of the new frontier of AI is we are using ML and AI in our tools to start looking at personas and looking at people. And I'll talk a little bit today about some of the criteria that we're using to start targeting individual learners with the training that they need at the time that they need it. So looking at a variety of different factors to come up with a formula that helps create adaptive dynamic training rather than top down. But specifically today, we've been working with a number of our customers just to help them understand what their audience needs when it comes to writing policy around AI usage, trying to figure out maybe what departments or what different parts of the business are going to be more accident prone or investigatory, or are looking to play with these tools but might not necessarily have the competency behind it to actually, not do something silly with the tools or to put the wrong information in. And so what we're trying to do is to actually put some data and put some quantification behind it so we're not just guessing. So that's what I say when I'm saying this is the one puppet slide. There's got to be a couple puppet slides. And if we have time at the end, I will play you guys some songs and skits and videos, and we can end with a really big laugh, because I know everyone loves the crazy stuff that we do. But actually, this is the serious side of my talk. So we're going to go backwards to go forward. So this is my Michelangelo puppet AI moment. You like it? Yeah. And I know that's really shocking. You're like, Kate, that's so revolutionary. We have to look backwards to look forwards. But what I think you can do is, at your organization, if you can start to know how your organization has adapted in the past to certain events, to certain new technologies, you can use that as a soft indicator to start planning your communications, your engagement strategy, and then reduce the overall risk as you look forwards. So that's what we're going to try to do today. So I have been talking on these topics for quite a while. I have many years in organizational change management. I've been working in enterprise IT for 20 plus years as the right hand of the CIO, trying to make change happen in the business. And it always cracked me up that the two things that are most important to change, whether that's rolling out a new system or rolling out a new policy or bringing in a new merger and acquisition or trying to get a new global WAN, it's all the same. It's just change that we need to introduce to the organization, to the processes, the technology, and the people, right? And the thing that always cracked me up was getting the budget and doing the vision wasn't hard. We're gonna build this system, it's gonna be amazing, it's gonna do everything business person you've ever wanted it to do. And they're like, yes, build that. Like, great, let's go build it. We go do the requirements engineering, and we go build this amazing system, and then we implement it, and we finally go live, and then we go live again, and then we test it, we go live a third time, and then finally it gets into the well, did they adopt it? We get into the let's see the value. Let's see where the rubber hits the road. And that's the part that I thought was most interesting, because you can't really prove it, and the people didn't like it. And I was like, we just spent 6 months listening to you. I have a requirements engineering document that has so many sub-tabs, my face is bleeding from Excel. Like, we argued for 2 hours in the conference room last fall about the color of the button. Sue, don't you remember? You were very adamant about cerulean, because that's the button the way it was before. You wanted it the same way. And so I became fascinated by why when we foisted these changes, both macro and micro changes upon people, some parts of my audiences like ate it up, and those were my innovators, and some people were Sue, right? And really wanted a cerulean button, but then wouldn't push it. And when it comes down to security, and when it comes down to what people are actually doing, I thought that was fascinating. So last year when I was here at CornCon, we talked about the rules of culture. And we talked about the golden rules of culture. You know, you get what you tolerate. We talked about the culture will eat your strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And we kind of like laid it down, because I think in cybersecurity, what happens is this. We talk, we do great presentations, they're amazing, they're really interesting. And usually on the last slide, what do you see? There's a line that goes, don't forget it's all about the people. And everyone's like, that's right. And then someone drops the mic and walks off the stage. And everybody's like, okay, but how? Does that make sense? So we go, culture. What is it? What does it mean? How do you use it? How does it work? And I really, really want to keep bringing those lessons here, because these are the different levers that you can use at your organization to accelerate change, to accelerate engagement, to get the whole organization on your side. And the reason I get very intense and passionate about this is I don't think there's ever been a more important time to do it. Not just because, you know, a couple of years ago I felt like, okay, the adversaries definitely have the upper hand on us, and we've got, like, you know, on one side, the metaphor I like to use is this is sort of like the Battle of Helm's Deep, right? And you've got the bad guys on one side, and they're all armed and dangerous, and then you have your IT teams on the wall, the elves and, you know, the middlemen of the kingdom, and they're all armed and dangerous. That's wonderful. And then you've got like one like Dilbert in the middle, and we're expecting that person to be the human firewall. And so I really believe that we don't have risky people. I don't think people are the weakest link. I think we have humans that we put into risky situations. Right? And so we have to flip our thinking of that. We have to flip our language of that. And so that's what I talked about at CornCon. And then at RSA this year, I was so thrilled to host a panel that was about how cyber culture within our own teams is related to first responder culture. And so what we ended up doing was bringing on a lieutenant from the New York City Fire Department. We brought on a New York City former police chief that now works in Cyber Command. So his job is to coordinate all of the public-private partnership for New York City, you know, and see if anything happens from a cyber perspective. As things go down, his job is to coordinate the government response if there is a local government or, you know, a police response required from that. And what we talked about, though, was burnout. We talked about trust on teams. We talked about, you know, how you are only as good as your practice. So how do we train? How do we respond like we train? And I think the thing that really got me is that at the end of that talk, what the conversations we were having on the show floor was really about, I think I'm starting to get it, because I think that's the gateway drug for cyber teams. Sometimes we talk about organizational culture, it feels like it's over here. Maybe we've been kept in the basement too long, right? You know, IT's been the other, and then security's the other, right? And so we kind of have a feeling, it's not necessarily us versus them, I don't think that's the right way to say it, but there's definitely a feeling of, we're the tech people, we got it. And then there's the business over here. And I think they feel that too. I think CISOs feel that when they walk into the boardroom. Do you agree? Yeah, because it's happening at the strategic level and it's happening at the tactical level. So that's the thing that I think we can start to click into. If we understand the culture and the values of our teams in cyber, then you start saying, oh, it's the same exact mechanisms. It's the same software. We're running the same operating program. It's called culture, right? So I think it really matters, and you have to know how it works. So my argument is, You can bring in someone like us to help you. You can bring in a lot of different organizational change specialists. There's a lot of different people. You're going to have to find a way to do this, but everyone is going to have to learn how to speak culture and how to really dig in and use it, because as a leader, this can make or break you. If you've got a team with a strong culture, they will run through brick walls for you. Agreed? Right? And that's one of the things about the military and the police. Those are the kind of teams they build. And I've seen all across, and I'm so sad that Chris isn't here today, because Chris and I had a huge talk about how he uses different stories and symbols and rituals on his team. Daily stand-ups, that's a ritual, right? How you do rewards, how you do incentives, how you appreciate people comes down to culture. So if we start to learn this, and as you use this as a change agent in any organization, I think we've all seen when it goes wrong, right? Absolutely. You can feel that friction right away. It's like, that's not the way we do things here, right? I definitely felt that a number of times in my life. So this is how we're going to do it. We have to talk about these things if we want to go forward. So I get really excited about these things, okay? So if we see how the stuff works inside the fort, I want to teach you how it works outside the walls in the business itself. Because for me, if you can get your people to be protective, adaptive cyber defense agents, then that is protective advantage. And I think we need that in AI right now, right? I want all of my employees singing from the same hymn book. Does that make sense? I want everybody, even if you don't know what to do, because I don't expect them to know what to do. I want them to know where to go. I want them to trust where they're going. And we've lost some of that. And so that's one of the reasons, I know it sounds stupid, but that's one of the reasons we use puppets, and we use songs, and we use lots of humor, and we use lots of positive messaging, because eventually it's about building the trust that A, you can do it as an employee, but B, if you don't know how, go to the people who will help you. And then, you know, it's up for us to make sure we treat them with empathy and care, which is like first desk responder. That's a whole nother conference. We'll talk about that later. Okay, fair enough. So this is why we do it with heart, and this is why I use puppets and I don't use compliance slide decks of death, because I don't know how many people actually pay attention to those things. So let's talk about how we can use it for protective advantage in AI. The first thing we're going to talk about is a shot glass full of peas. Okay. Who knows what food insecurity is? Most everybody? Okay, so food insecurity is where there is a cultural value that you are not going to have enough to eat. There are not going to be enough resources. Food scarcity, food deserts create certain behaviors. It creates certain psychology, certain patterns that you can see over time. And it is and can be a multi-generational issue, right? So it has a psychology, it has behavior, it has expression. Hoarding, right? Price shopping, inability to make a decision, the physical, we have a physiology, right? You know, you get that anxiety, that tightness in your chest. And so food insecurity is a real thing. So I'd like to introduce you to Henrietta. That's Henrietta. It's my grandma. Okay. So my grandmother grew up in the Depression. She was the youngest of 5. And when she was 2, her mother died of the Spanish flu. And so her father luckily ran the local store, and they had an apple tree in the backyard. And she got married to Joe, so that's my Grandpa Joe, who was a Marine in World War II stationed on Hawaii. And so in her formative years, when our brains are young and perhaps a bit more malleable than mine is right now, right, she dealt with watching her friends and her community go through food insecurity. They really had to look for food. They had to scourge for things. They lost everything. She watched her dad trade apples for other necessities that were out of stock. She dealt with food rationing, right, and food stamp books. Does anyone know what the food stamp books were for, right, World War II? And I still have hers. So with a baby on each hip, she's waiting in line to get bread and butter. And so what this did is this really ingrained into her a lot of different unique behaviors. So needless to say, my grandmother became a thrift machine. She wasted nothing. She mixed juice before it was cool. She mixed cereals. She would put weird things together. Her meal planning and her ability to pivot was nothing short. I wish she was in the Army, because that woman could move on a dime if beef was on sale. And so it was just amazing to see that. But as grandkids experiencing, there's just layers of uncharted mysteries in that refrigerator. So you had never idea what you were gonna get. Like you're like, hey, we're at grandma's house, we're gonna have a snack, this is great. You open up the fridge, you like pour out something and it's not what you thought it was at all. So there's a lot of novelty that was not, maybe that created different food anxiety for me, but I was like, what is in there? So I call it the original feel factor. So you never knew what you were gonna get when you opened up her fridge, but these were her hard-coded values. This became my grandmother's behavioral operating system, and we all have them. This was her groove, okay? And she got that groove through high impact emotions, such as fear and worry. I mean, we haven't been through anything like that recently, have we? No, it's been great. It's been really good. Okay, so high impact emotions, fear and worry, but then also the dopamine hits of getting the thrift. And Wynn was talking about some of this stuff earlier, the neurology, how our brains work, the chemistry actually behind it, those reinforce the groove, right? And she loved that. She loved the thrift, the getting a deal, getting 2 for $5, whatever. And then the serotonin you get from taking care of your family and all that warm bonding feeling of sitting down and knowing you did a good job. I've given my family the nutrition they need at a price I can afford. Sweet. And, you know, we couldn't ever get her out of it. So it's like, you know, the 90s, she's over for Thanksgiving and she's like saving apple peels. And we're like, Grandma, it's the 90s, we have food. It's okay. Grandma, relax. Like, Grandma, it's okay. But you couldn't make her relax because that was her emotional safety. She was so comfortable in the groove and she was really good at it. So we used to say she would literally save a shot glass full of peas. And 13 years ago at her funeral, my cousin, who's an artist, gave us each a shot glass full of clay peas that now sits on my kitchen windowsill every day as a memento reminder. I don't know if Grandma would be happy. It's like, I have other things that remind me of her too, but that's the little funny one. And we all laughed. I mean, we all laughed and cried because that's one of the things it was about. That was Grandma, right? So she handed down that thrift to her daughters. And my house was the one to go to if the Russians invaded in the 80s, because we had 10 of everything. We had canned goods, we had pickles, we had homemade tomato sauce, we had 2 freezers full of whatever was on sale, and my mom's got the same groove, okay? So we really know how to do it. Now, growing up, I first moved to New York after college, and so even though I could cook for myself, there was no space. I mean, my studio apartment had 6 floor tiles, 6 square feet, and I had 1 burner, and I had a sink, and I had a half fridge. And I think it was a walk-in closet that they turned into like a little tiny kitchenette. I got very good at Dutch oven cooking. I was like legit. But anyways, there wasn't any space, there wasn't any time, and there wasn't any need. And then I moved to London for the next 10 years, and it made New York studio apartments look spacious, right? And everyone shopped every day. It was a different, it was a different way of doing things. I loved it. It was very chic. It was very European, like such a tiny fridge. Mayonnaise comes in like little tubes, like toothpaste. And then I get here and it's like Costco. It's like, right? So after London, I moved to Dallas, and yeah, I got space. I got a lot of space. And then came COVID, right? And the panic hit me. I mean, like a real panic. I am a relatively rational person. This drove my behavior big time, and it wasn't until I looked at it in retrospect, I was like, every time I went to the grocery store, it was like I was preparing for a military excursion. I was like, get the freezer bags, get the thing, get the pack, we're gonna go, get your wipes, get your sanitizer, get your mask, we're going in, we're going for 1 trip, that's like a Sam Kinison joke. Anyways, 1 trip, we're making 1 trip, right? So that drove my behavior. And I had this very deep fear that my children might never see avocados again. Like, it was so irrational, but it was so real to me. And I think I turned into a prepper. It was hard. And it was really stressful, but in a way, I was really good at it, because it felt like, I was like, oh, I know what this is. My mom taught me this, and I'm turning into my mother. So that's good. right? Okay, no, fair enough. We'll move on from that. So I got it from my mom. And so that is hand-me-down culture, right? So this is some of the things that we need to think about because we hand things down through culture. You have family traditions, things that we do over and over. They're lessons that we have learned. They're stories when we had good times and when we had hard times. And then there was that one time when the dog ate the Christmas ham, right? So my point is this, is that your organization has generations too. And we hand down lessons, stories, the way things are done over time. And so you've got the carriers of culture, that's an official term, people who work at your organization who've been there, let's say 10 years or more. And what happens when the newbies show up? Well, that might be what the policy says, but no one's actually going to do that, you know? Why do you do that? Why are you doing it that way? How are things done around here? You know, as a new employee, you spend the first couple of months just trying to figure it out, right? And so these are the things we have to think of, is that not only do we have the generations of culture and things that are handed down that we're going to have to unpick and investigate, because if we can see how things were done before, I can give you indications of how it will roll out in the future. If we know that certain events have happened in the business, those can ripple in your business across time. Especially if you're working at a major organization, or if you're working at a small organization too. Major events. What are some major events? Mergers? Acquisitions? How about rounds of layoffs? How does that change your employees' behavior and their decision making on a day-to-day basis? It's actually more than you think, right? And so how that major breach event might ripple across time really matters. And so this is why the psychology of your employees and the culture that you have at the organization matters. And what we're going to talk about is how you can start to unpick it and how you can start to quantify it so that you can get a better sense of how to be proactive in your messaging, how you can target different audiences based on their psychological or cultural need, and that you're bringing everybody into the tent. As opposed to just sending one message you think will land with 80% of your employees, you're creating two messages. I got the 80 over here, I'm gonna touch the 20 over here with a different message. Does this make sense? Right? Because we're wasting our touch points. When we don't think about these things, you are wasting every interaction you have with your employees. Nike wouldn't waste that time with you as a consumer. They want you to buy the shoes, right? They look at it, they go, and not every message has to be like, I am teaching you the entire policy in this email. It's like, it's okay to have emotional moments. It's okay to have a reminder. It's okay to have a nudge. And we can start thinking about those things because it's those cultural elements that allow us to do the things we need to do better. How we adapt as a company is culture. That's part of our capability set as an organization. How we respond to crisis is culture and training, right? And so that's where what we talked about at RSA with the first responders, okay? How you respond to a crisis is culture and training, and any good CISO knows that, right? How well they put their teams through the different tests to make sure that if a breach happens, if an incident happens, we know what to do. We're just getting started with the boards, but we'll get them there, I promise. It's gonna be okay. That was mostly a joke. It's late, it's okay. Okay, so how can we do this? How can we explore the world to be seen also through the lens of culture? Because this is about how your people are adapting to AI. So we're gonna go through a couple of stats to talk about some of these big, broad trends that I see in AI adoption in terms of people's perception and psychology of using it. And then we're gonna talk about what does that actually mean to your business and how can you start thinking this way in order to segment your audiences and work with them differently based on what risk they might actually have. All right, so not everyone is gonna have the same risk. Not everyone's gonna use this the same. And I know that's kind of obvious. It's like, well, how big of a risk is AI adoption to your business? It's like, Kate, that's another brilliant question. But it's like, we can either go, it's really big, or we can start to unpick it, right? And we can start to put numbers behind it, and we can start to put reasons why, because your reasons why are different than your reasons why. And that's the difference in organizational culture. So this is about how we're going to use this for protective advantage and how you can weave in your organizational values as well. So this is what I think is interesting. Okay, we're going to hit some stats. Okay, 77%, and this is a very recent poll from Pew, very statistical people, so I believe what they say. 77% of currently surveyed Americans are concerned AI will cause job loss within the next 12 months. How many people are part of that 77%? Do you believe it? Don't all raise your hand at once. Okay. 1 in 3 employees, Americans, have already used an AI tool. Yep. And then 65% would rather use ChatGPT instead of search engines. Yeah, depending. But I think it's the conversational interface, and I think it's because Google keeps messing with the algorithm and gives me crap results lately. I won't talk about my SEO right now, I'm very angry. Okay, so, but my point is this, yes, but who? Because if I've got 77%, but what does that mean about the other portion of that? How many groups are within that? And then, you know, are the people who have used the AI tool, are those my early adopters and I should be worried about them? What percentage of that are actually my laggards? Who has inertia? Who am I going to have to convince to get on the bus? And then how do I convince them to do it safely? So I love statistics, and I love being like, okay, well, 7 is a lot of people. We can say there's definitely something there. But then we're going to have to unpick it because there's a lot that really sits underneath every single one of these numbers, okay? So about half, 44-ish% of those surveyed believe they can tell the difference between content written by a human and those generated by chatbots. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. But again, this is a cognitive bias because we all think we're smarter than we really are. Until you come to something like CornCon and you hear Win talk and then you realize you actually aren't as smart as you thought you were at all. Okay, the other thing I think that's interesting about this is when we start to look at all the stats, and I mean the marketing stats on this stuff are coming in hot and heavy because the news knows this drives clicks. They're like, you're gonna die, AI, the robots, overlords are coming for you, and everyone's like, oh, okay, click, 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 right? So I expect that too, but the thing I find really exciting is that, like, because we're in an emerging space, we're in sense and explore, right? In any complex system, you're gonna get, like, there's just numbers that people are throwing out. I'm like, it doesn't even make any sense. Like, why are people even answering questions this way? So we started to do some of this sentiment analysis with one of our customers, who's a large manufacturer, because they wanted to get a read on just basically what was going on in the organization before they rolled out their AI policy. They just want to say, like, are you using it? Are you not using it? How do you feel about it? What's going on? And then we divided up by segment and we looked at how long they were with the organization and who were the remote workers, and we started to segment it. And the thing that came back was there was a couple big trends. I was like, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. And then there was this whole column of I have no idea what's going on. And I'm sure you guys see the same kind of data sometimes in your event monitoring and your tools when you're sensing and exploring, you're trying to get some insight back. We're in the same phase. So you got to take everything with a grain of salt because the people we're surveying don't even know what they don't know. Does that make sense? So we're getting a lot of like stuff that should correlate, but it doesn't really. And we're like, but then is it a badly worded question, or is it just that people can't answer honestly because they don't know? Right? So there's a lot of that going on too in the numbers, but this is one of the ones I thought was really funny. So here's a contradictory one. 76% of Americans said it should be illegal, I agree with these, to create video and audio deepfakes that imitate a real person without that person giving permission. I think that should be part of a digital bill of rights. Okay, now here's the funny part. However, of the Americans who have used creative AI tools, 47% have created images, audio, or videos using the likeness of a well-known person. I think it should be illegal, but I'm doing it anyways. Right, so we're still trying to figure out how all this stuff works. So I just use that as an example to say, the first couple of times you go out and ask these questions, as you get these answers back from your employees, they're not gonna make sense. You're gonna have to do it over time to start looking at the patterns and start refining the audiences, because this isn't a once and done kind of thing. And P.S., by the way, I don't think that any of these kind of culture or assessment surveys should be a once and done or a yearly benchmark. I think they should be all the time, and that's a whole nother thing. And if you want to talk at the bar, I can get on a soapbox about this. But here's another interesting one that had a really high clear signal. 79% of Americans think companies that create AI tools should have culpability in the actions and outputs of their AI. I know. Interesting, Agree or disagree? Yep. So the thing is that if you are using AI, which y'all are, or if you're building AI into your products and platforms and services, the ethics of that are part of your culture. Because doing the right thing versus getting punished is something you can measure. And you're gonna wanna know how many of your employees are afraid to speak truth to power before you go build something like this. Does that make sense? Okie dokies. Here's another interesting one. Percentage of workers reporting certain mental health concerns regarding AI. So 51% agree that AI has a negative impact on their mental health. 66% agree employer thinks the workplace environment is a lot mentally healthier than it actually is. I would agree with that. Okay? And this is also about, by worry about making some job duties obsolete, the ones who are worried about AI also think that mental health is poor or fair. Right? So there's a whole subsegment of your employee base. And I don't know if it's in line with these stats or not, but what this study, what Pew, there's like 5 or 6 that just came out in the last couple of months, they all have about the same percentages. We're talking about a good 20 to 30% of your audience is seriously concerned, has very negative perceptions of this, and doesn't know who to talk to. Do you guys all agree with that? There's a whole bunch in the middle we'll talk about too that don't know what they're doing yet, and so we're going to segment a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit more. Workers with a high school education or less are significantly more likely than those with college degrees to report they're worried that some or all of their job duties will be replaced by AI. That creates insecurity in your cybersecurity. Because if my people are not happy, healthy, and productive, I'm worried. And I know it's just a job. We'll talk about that score later. But this is the point, is you have to go out and sense this, and you have to put some data behind it to kind of see where it is. What percentage of your current employees fit this category? I mean, if you work in manufacturing, if you work in some other industries, agriculture, we're not all gonna, not everyone's gonna be at the PhD level. And so it is significantly different. Here's another interesting one. Oh, this one. 30% of workers making less than $50,000 are worried, compared to less than 15% of those making over $150,000. Right? There are very, very different. Oh, also fully remote workers are much more apt than in-person workers to say their job is likely to change. So 54%. 54% of remote workers think their work is going to significantly change because of AI. So how we reach them, how we talk to them, how we empathize with them, how we understand them so we can write better training, better communication, better policy that lands. If you spend the time and money, and I know sometimes it's hard to get budget for this stuff, that's another conversation, but if you spend time and money on this in advance, you save so much time in the long tail. Does that make sense? Because if I can get you up, and then I don't have to do the thing where we're just wandering forever, repeating the same messages, going, I don't know why they're not getting it. I don't know why they're not getting it. It's like, well, if you speak to them in a way they feel heard right off the bat, you are gonna land those messages. And they're gonna be like, oh my God, information security understands me. They're talking my language. Be like, that's what I am talking about. Okay, the other thing is, survey also revealed that workers who were worried about being replaced by AI, so again, that's like 40%. Were also monitored by their employer. They felt like they didn't matter in the workplace. So here's the thing. If they don't like AI, and so you're going to have a segment of your audience that is worried about this, and they feel like you're watching them, which you are, depending on the level of intrusion, but in retail, we're seeing a lot of this. We're seeing a lot of worker pushback from the cameras that are monitoring how efficient you are at pouring a coffee. Does this make sense? Yeah? So they basically feel disenfranchised as workers. And I will tell you that that score, we call it the employee give a shit score, and it matters significantly, correlating to cybersecurity behavior practices and how willing they are to change and how willing they are to adopt new behaviors. If it's just a job and they don't like you, you're going to have a hard time rolling out that new policy. Okay, so I'm not surprised that people are really worried. I'm not surprised with the media and all the things that they're seeing in their daily lives that a significant number of our employees don't know what to do. They don't understand how it's going to impact them. And they might not be on that digital technology adoption curve where they're going to go play with this stuff. That might actually be a good thing, right? But this is what they're seeing every day. So we're in cyber, and I know we see this and we kind of brush it off, but it's going to react with them emotionally. This is a big emotional impact. The advent of AI and how much this is in the news and how much this is changing, and right, like ChatGPT got 1 million users in the first 2 seconds, whatever. So it is a cultural impact moment. This has enough emotional power behind it. It's not a Great Depression, even though we might be in one of those next year. It's not a Great Depression, but it is a seismic impact in terms of consciousness and psychology and what your employees are thinking about and what they're going through. So there is a misconception, even at the management level, that you guys are going to have to talk about, coach, counsel, take out for beers, right, around this exact statement. Because do you guys think this is true or false? Organizations achieve value with AI at the expense of individuals. It should be. But that is a very large thing. And I see this sentiment creeping into management reporting and fancy pants consultants, and I'm not going to name any names, but I will say that there's some very large, fancy, expensive consulting firms, and you see this psychology woven into just what they're writing about and how they're talking to organizations, okay? So let's flip to 2 things. One is I'm running out of batteries. Do we have any power? Anybody? Okay, I have an extra battery. I'm gonna keep talking as I get my battery. Let's flip into your organization, and let's flip into how individuals are actually thinking, and then we'll kind of pull it all together at the end. I never leave home without it. Well, I've got the, I just need my cord. I don't remember. Got it. It's all good. Do-do-do-do, do-do-do. Now he says it's right over here. Thank you so much. See? This is the best $140 I ever spent. Swear to God, it weighs like a ton, but I love it. Okay. So let's talk about where people are now. Scared but excited. It's a little bit complex, right? But what we can do is we can start to unpick the characteristics behind these groups. And so one of the things that we built is what I call the happy cybersecure human model. Again, happy to discuss it at the bar. But it unpicks all these different characteristics on what you know, what you think, what you feel, how you perceive risk, the attitudes you have towards your IT in general, how you look at all these different things. And we pick it apart, and then we map this against your roles and your general risk. So here are some of the things that are coming out of our surveys. Right? Here are some of the cognitive biases and kind of grooves and patterns we're seeing people fall into. So people tend to trust the outputs of software programs. And everybody knows that, but then how do we flip and train and teach on that and nudge and remind people what ChatGPT actually is, or what any large language model actually is, without using words like large language model? Because how many people think that their employees will turn off if you start saying things like that? Right? Okay, so how do we get them to not trust it? And that can come through stories or rhymes or riddles or social media posts or any kind of crazy things. There's tons of ways that we can talk about how to get that language into their heads, but these are the things that they don't know. People avoid tasks and works they don't like isn't easy. So if you can figure that out in a jobs to be done matrix, I can tell you which employees might be actually putting stupid stuff into AI because it's too hard for them to, think. Okay? People tend to believe AI outputs that agree with already what they think, right? So confirmation bias, that's a famous one. Nothing bad will happen to me. Optimism bias, right? So we can tell which employees have more of that, or which departments you have that have more of that. And again, I anonymize it all. This is not about targeting individual employees because I find that ethically wrong, but this is about giving you better maps, so you know where to steer the car and how to steer it. People tend to be enamored by new tools and bandwagons. Yeah? Oh, everyone's using ChatGPT. I just heard about the news. Maybe I should use ChatGPT. There's something going on here, right? So it's only a percentage of your population. This goes back to my original question. How much? How many? Who? Where are they? Where do they live? Like in your organization map. So we take all those things and we map them against all these different cultural and psychology characteristics, like digital work preferences, uncertainty avoidance, right? That's a very strong one in many of your different policy decisions, so I'm happy to talk about that. Fear of job displacement, self-efficacy and determination, talking about conscious competence, right? Do I think I can use it? Am I afraid to use it? Am I allergic to technology? What percentage of your population is allergic to technology? There's a number. It's good to know, because I can tell you if that number maps to also being low in certain other competency areas, these are your high-risk employees that you should be targeting with certain training ASAP, rather than just blanketing everyone on the same stuff, okay? What type of digital adopter they are. So one of the things is we've mapped these out into different roles and to different what I call tribes. And what you can start to tell is that based on the digital adoption type, right? So you're looking at, if I'm looking at my innovators, right? I'm gonna just use broad words. These aren't like big cultural terms, but if I'm looking at my innovators who also like to tinker, who don't mind playing fast and loose with the rules, if I haven't set them up with a secure box to play in, they're gonna go play everywhere. And that's how you get research in the cloud, right? So the other thing we map against is this. Because I do think that when we come back to the end, we'll talk about this. Employees that feel like they're part of your team, part of the community, and I know the social contract with work has changed, so you can't ignore that fact, but it's not necessarily an insider threat. I don't want to call it that, but it is. Does that make sense? So you do actually have to know. So if you have HR teams that are doing employee satisfaction surveys, go get them and get the data and really dig into it. Because if they're doing it regularly over time, you can use that as an additional data point to start seeing how it maps to other parts of your organization. Drill down by department, drill down by location, drill down by pay grade. Woo-hoo-hoo, things change, right? And then you know how to reach your audience, because then I can be like, wow, here's the $50,000 threshold where everyone said they thought AI was gonna replace the job. Here's their actually employees in it. There's this, there's like 5 different points around you. I can craft a very targeted message to get people back on your side. Does that make sense? So this is how you use that data. You can go get it. You can survey for it. You can find it at your organization, but you gotta start putting it together to craft better stories. And then you map it against your organization, right? See how people naturally cluster, right? How do they come together in groups? You can heat map it against different types of risk that you have. And then we can help see where there are different connections against all of this. And so these are my favorite. This is, I don't know if you can see his office space, but you know, if you're the guy with the red stapler, you know, we've moved down to the basement. I want to know what's going on behind each of these different characters and what they're doing, and so you can create them into personas and start to reach them in different, better ways. So here's the last thing. You have a flaming sword. Right now, with the business, you have a flaming sword because they have no idea what's happening, but they really don't want to miss out on this one. You know, there was Sean from Boston Meridian was talking about how few organizations have actually finished the digital adoption and the cloud transformation that Gartner's been promising for the last 45 years. But it's really interesting because there is a coalescing of psychology around the leadership of the organizations that they don't want to miss this boat. There's a palpable sense of urgency at the board, at the C-level. You know, we were talking about RSA last week, that, you know, ChatGPT came out right before RSA, and so none of the printed material said AI, but the only word everyone said at RSA was AI. 2 words, acronym. Anyways, here's the point. This is a literal quote from McKinsey. We were behind on automation and digitization. We finally closed the gap. Okay. We don't want to be left behind again, but we're not sure how to think about generative AI. Does that sound like your executives? Does that sound like the people that you're working with? So we got to use the wave. 67% of senior IT leaders are prioritizing generative AI for their business within the next 18 months. 1/3 said it's a top priority. Does anyone agree with that? Does that sound like your company? No, okay, but you can use the wave because this is something that your leaders want to talk about, and the risk of employees doing not so smart things with it is enormous. And we've covered that in 5 conversations over the last 2 days, so I don't need to cover that. The point is, you should be having the conversations now. You should be using your organization and culture to drive those messages home because we don't have time to figure this out. 79% of senior IT leaders reported concerns that these technologies bring the potential for security risks. You think? Why isn't that 100? I don't know. I agree. So I'm calling this generative anxiety, okay? And the quote that I loved was, it's not that anything is on fire, it's that everyone in our organization is holding a flamethrower, okay? So this is things we should be doing anyways. These are the activities we should be doing to get to know our people. So I'm passionate about this in terms of your general cybersecurity culture. I'm just showing you that AI is a flaming sword that you can walk into the board and you could say, we need to figure out where our people are. I want to start to measure. I need a culture audit. I need a baseline. I need a survey. I need to go talk to HR. I need the remit to get some data around this. I need a new, a sentiment analysis tool. This is the flaming sword to use because we have seen through digital transformation, we've seen through some of the rollouts we've done, the big seismic impacts, the cloud. We haven't done this well. Does anyone disagree with that? Like, the way we're moving applications to the cloud and SaaS and changing tools on our users, we haven't gotten that right. I don't think we've nailed it, right? And we keep putting our poor humans into these very risky security situations. So it is up to the employers to make sure that any new technology you introduce to the workplace should enhance rather than diminish a sense of meaning. No one ever talks about that part. Why does it matter to you, to your job, to this company, to anything? And we're so lucky because in cybersecurity, because we're all online and we're a digital culture now, I get to people faster through talking about their kids online than anything else, right? So that's what we're going to use, right? We're going to use the emotional motivations that they have, but this is how you get the budget. Because they're worried about this. They want to find better ways to do it, and the security risks are there, and the stories are coming in hot and fast. So if you come and you say, we need to create targeted interventions that give us protective advantage so that when we take the opportunity of AI and really leverage it at this organization, we don't end up with a Samsung. And I think that's a compelling message to start scoping next year's budgets and start looking at how you're going to align some of these things. Because if your employees feel disenfranchised, it will have a ripple effect on the other security behaviors at your organization. Okay? Happy humans are more secure humans. And I really believe that. I don't think we should scare them. I think they should be happy in their work. I know that's not necessarily up to us, but if we can do anything to help, let's do it. But I do think that scared, anxious, not bought-in employees are a greater security risk to the organization because they won't treat the data and the information with the care that it deserves, okay? So this is the last thing. So new research shows that employees derive individual value from AI when using the technology. It improves their sense of competency, autonomy, and relatedness. If we can get them to use it the right way, it moves all these other metrics in a beneficial way. Does that make sense? If we give them AI to play with in a safe way, if we teach them how to use it safely, you get all these little extra add-on benefits. Awesome sauce, I love that. You cannot drive competency in AI fast enough without targeted approaches, without looking at your audiences, who's using it, what are they using it for, what is their competency, what is their uncertainty avoidance, what is their risk tolerance, getting in and understanding that, and then dealing with it section by section. A one-size-fits-all will not resonate with your audience on this, and it's too big to mess up. You cannot have Autonomy without rules of safety. You cannot let your employees, and I know you guys know this, you can't just let them wild and loose on this to figure it out as they go, right? So we have to put the policies in place, and if they look like our old policies, who's gonna read them? Do you know that information security just rolled out this amazing AI policy last night? I was riveted. I was up all night in bed reading it. I just couldn't put it down. It's amazing. Okay, and finally, you cannot magically generate relatedness. So when we talk about a sense of belonging, we talk about employees being part of the culture and your whole organization, you have to get into the values of the organization, figure out what your values are, and use those. So you can measure it, you can turn it into something objective, you can track progress on it, and I think by using some of these approaches, you can go to the board with really impactful statements about IT and IS are really doing everything in their power to make sure that this adoption goes really well. So I don't know if we have time for questions or anything, but I was just going to say, hi, thank you very much. I know, I just had to breathe for a second. Nobody? No arguments? Aw, that's all right.
Oh, we got one.
Yes. One question.
Hi, can you hear me well?
Hi.
Hi. So my question was, so the latest point, or one of the bigger points that you gave us was that the policy needs to be presented in a way that they'll want to look at it, right? To me, what comes to mind is like pool rules, you know, on the top of it. Do you have any?
Do I have a pool?
No,
okay.
Ideas.
No, fair enough. So he asked sort of like pool rules and basically creating things as a list. So look, there's lots of different information transfer mechanisms that you can use, and you have to think of it like a layered approach. It's like Nike trying to get your attention. I'm going to see a bus stop ad, I'm going to see a magazine article, I'm going to see a news segment, it's a documentary. Like, you're going to have to be pervasive in how you do these things. So for me, it's not one set of thou shalt rules. I do like having a do-don't list, only for the simplicity, right? And just keeping it somewhere that it is accessible if people do need to reference it. But I do think we need to break down the policies, and what I've seen be most digestible is when you break them down into two things. One, the smallest nugget possible, and you build it kind of over time. And then two, you're doing the reminders on the policy violations that matter first. Don't try to jam the whole policy down everybody's throat all the time first. You pull out the things that matter and you just start A/B testing them and you push them. If you have a large organization and you do the cultural measurement, you can then also tune and have different versions. So for instance, we was rolling out a policy with an oil and gas company, and we were getting like abysmal phishing test rates. And so one of the things we realized was the way the policy was written was very, individualistic, UK American kind of terminology. We wrote the same exact policy from a collectivist standpoint because we're rolling out to Africa and Latin America. And so we were talking about the reasons why it matters that you do this. And instead of being like you and your career and your company and your relationship with the employer, it's like your family and our community and the things we do together and keeping your coworkers safe. And we raised phishing rates, like we reduced phishing risk by raising the number of positive reports, just by changing the language on the policy rollout. So even simple things like that can go a huge, long way of people being like, oh, well, that makes sense because you're talking my language. So those are the kind of things I would do for policy. Don't think of it as one giant laundry list. Break it up into lots of pieces and be creative. Oh, Bruce, hi.
You knew I'd have to do this.
I know.
Surprise, surprise. Employees do not read policies.
I know.
They acknowledge that they've read the policy, they never have. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is, I don't believe we need an AI policy.
Okay.
We already have an acceptable use policy. We already have policies around classification of data, correct handling of data. We have all of this. Mm-hmm. What we did is not create another policy. I created a fun little sheet, one page with pictures that said, hey, have you heard about this stuff? Did you know it's going to lie to you? Did you know that what you get back may be copyrighted material? Did you know that you're not supposed to put our data up there? Mm-hmm. And that's what we did. And instead of trying to say, here's another policy, thou shalt not, and if you do, we're going to beat you with a wooden spoon or something like that. We told them how to use it. We just gave them bullets in nice pictures, nice wording, so we're not threatening, we're trying to help. And I think that's helping us much better than yet another policy that someone's not going to read.
Cool.
Your thoughts on that?
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I think it is interesting also to then see it's, level one is push the information out in an interesting way, and then it's get the feedback. Then it is test how many people are actually doing it, and then test again to see how it's actually moving. Because I think it is, we have to create that as a conversation. But I do love that like AI will lie to you. So it's like we've got a song in production in studio right now about, we kind of went Robin Thicke blurred lines, but we're turning it into AI lies. But it's kind of like got that Marvin Gaye backing track, so I think it'd be blurred lie. No? I'm not gonna do it, okay, fair enough. But that one's coming soon, and so even Puppet singing about AI and like how it's gonna lie to you, we'll just keep that. Every time you go to the tool, I want them to be like, all right, AI lies.
And understanding the company culture
Yep,
is important.
yeah.
Full disclosure, I'm a customer who's done this.
He's amazing. Thank you, Bruce. Best customer ever. In this room. All right. All right. Cool. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. It was wonderful to talk to you. Thank you.